Hello, this is Angelia, and you are listening to or watching the podcast, Why You Do What You Do, the podcast that talks about human development and psychology to maybe help you figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. Oh man, last time we were talking about midlife social relationships, and now we're going to move on to consensual relationships, and yes, that means the adult kind. Marriages, homosexual unions, and friendships typically involve two people of the same generation and involve mutual choice. And it should. If you're in a relationship where it's not mutual choice, you need to get out of it. How do these relationships fare in middle age? Marriage. Midlife marriage today is very different from what it used to be. When life expectancies were shorter, couples who remained together for 25, 30, or 40 years were rare because people weren't living that long. The most common pattern was for marriages to be broken by death and for survivors to remarry. People had many children and expected them to live at home until they married. There was no, kids, young ones getting out and getting apartments of their own and all this stuff. They all lived at home until they got married, and then they got their own home. Usually the parents helped them to do this. It was unusual for a middle-aged husband and wife to be alone together because there were too many kids around. Today, more marriages end in divorce, but couples who stay together can often look forward to 20 or more years of married life after the last child leaves home. That's the goal. What happens to the quality of a long-time marriage? Marital satisfaction, in almost all studies, found a U-shaped curve. That's like, it's up, then it's down, then it's up again. After the first few years of marriage, satisfaction appears to decline, and then, sometime in middle age, to rise again through the first part of late adulthood. That's your honeymoon phase. You're all happy at first, then it declines, and then it goes back up once you mature and accept each other. An analysis of data from two surveys of individuals in first marriages conducted in 1986 and 1987 through 1988 sought to ascertain just when the dip and rise in satisfaction occurs and why. The samples were, of necessity, cross-sectional. There are no comparable longitudinal data covering the entire span of adulthood because, that would be hard to keep up with someone's whole entire life. But they are large, a total of 8,929, and one was nationally representative. So they had a good section here, so, it's a good example. Both women and men were included, and marital satisfaction was measured against the duration of a marriage. So they can't say it was sexist because it included men and women. To control for any skewing of data due to termination of unsatisfactory marriages, statistical techniques simulated the inclusion of such couples, attributing to them low marital quality. And sometimes there is that. Sometimes we marry someone for the wrong reasons, or we marry them and think we love them, and then, you get into that later on. You're like, why am I with this person? I just, no. The picture that emerged is a clear affirmation of the U-shaped pattern. During the first 20 to 24 years of marriage, the longer a couple have been married, the less satisfied they tend to be. And we all know the, anecdote about the old couples fighting and arguing all the time. Then the association between marital satisfaction and length of marriage begins to turn positive. At 35 to 44 years of marriage, a couple tend to be even more satisfied than during the first 4 years because they've gotten to know each other and they can get along with each other now because they're more mature. The years of marital decline are those in which parental and work responsibilities tend to be the greatest. So stress is the number one problem with marriages. I think we all already probably knew that. But when you're raising kids, that's stressful. When you're trying to build your career or work or whatever, that's stressful. Those are the years you're going to be most dissatisfied with your marriage. Two important factors in the demands on parents are family finances and the number of children still at home. Of course, if the finances are not there, I mean, my husband at one point was not bringing in enough, and I went back to work because I had been off with my youngest child, and I told him, I said, it's not enough money, I have to go back to work. That didn't work out so good, because he couldn't handle the kids. So, the kids end up being in bed every evening, and I'd come home and they'd be crying like, Dad, put us to bed, we didn't even do anything. And so other arrangements had to be made. The pressure of too little income and too many mouths to feed burdens a relationship. Of course it does, because especially women, the kids are the most important. That's how we feel about it. That's how we're made to feel about it, through nature. So if men are putting off something or women are putting off something in favor of feeding the kids, that's a problem. Especially if the burdens are not equally shared. Now in my home right now they're not, because I only make a few hundred, a few thousand a year. I'm not pulling it in. If you guys want to help me out, go for it. But the hubby's making the most money. But now there were times when we were younger that I was making more money than him, and times he would get laid off in the winter and I was supporting him. I would go talk to my boss and say, I need to be here full time because he's laid off for the winter, and she would say okay, and so I worked full time during those times. So sometimes I made more money than him. The U-shaped curve generally hits bottom early in middle-aged. So like I say, that middle age, that 30 and 40 mark, where you're raising the kids and trying to get yourself in a good, stable place, that's stressful, and that adds stress to your marriage. When many couples have teenage children and are heavily involved in careers, satisfaction usually reaches a height when children are grown. So once the kids are grown, you can go, glad that's over, and have more time for yourselves. Many people are entering or are in retirement, and we're headed toward that age. My husband's 60, I'm 57, so I'm not quite there and he's not quite there, but we see the finish line, so we're ready. And a lifetime accumulation of assets helps ease financial worries, and that's been the case with us. Like I said, my grandma said you won't have any money until you get your house paid off when you're in your 50s, and that was true. Now that we don't have that hanging over our heads, we have a little more money. We were got a little more savings, and my husband's old enough to pull out of his 401k. We put out a little bit to do a roof, and his car is going to be paid off pretty soon, and then he's probably going to get a truck and give me his car, and whatever. But the financial crunch that we felt, raising the kids is off our backs, so that's helpful. We can afford to do some things like go on little vacations and weekend getaways. On the other hand, these changes may produce new pressures and challenges, especially for people who are not prepared for retirement, and they don't know what they're going to do. I know we all see these old folks working at the store, and that's because wherever they worked didn't have the 401k, don't have the retirement. They're not quite old enough to be collecting Social Security, or if they are, they're not making enough, so they're still working. And some people just want to work when they're that old. There was a 78-year-old man at the grocery store we used to go to, and he just wanted to work. He said, don't want to sit around and do nothing. So, an observational study of a representative sample of couples in their 40s and 60s found that the older couples showed less negative emotions in resolving conflicts than the younger ones. So again, with experience and maturity, you can talk to each other a little bit nicer and constructively than you could when you were younger. midlife divorce. Divorce in midlife is relatively rare, despite all the stories you hear about the midlife crisis. Most divorces occur during the first 10 years of marriage. That's because at some point you might realize you have irreconcilable differences, you can't work it out, and you just got to part ways. Thus, for people who go through a divorce at midlife, when they may have assumed their lives were settled, and most of us probably do assume your life's settled by the time you're like 30, the breakup can be traumatic. And I know I was pretty angry during mine, and I had kind of written off the whole sex of men, and written off marriage, and I was a pretty angry little person, so I had some mindset issues and some theories that I've changed my mind on, because we all grow and learn, especially for women. Yeah, because we usually get men say women get the better end of the deal, but not usually. Who are more negatively affected by divorce at any age than men are, because we still don't make as much as men. We're trying to get that equaled out, but we still don't usually. So a single mom is going to have a harder time financially than a single dad would. Middle-aged people who divorce and do not remarry tend to have less financial security than those who remain married. Like I just said, if you don't have a partner, it's all on you. And if you're not making that much, then that can be stressful. Again, this is particularly true for women who may have to go to work, perhaps for the first time. And I worked with an older woman. I was coming off of one job to another, and I worked with this older woman, and she's like, "Oh, so you're raising your kids? This is your first job?" And I'm like, "No, it's not my first job. I worked here, and there." And of course, then they wanted to see a resume, and then she was like, "Oh, your references." Like, what are you talking about? I did work there. She goes, "Oh, well, the contact person's not there anymore." I'm like, because the contact person's not there anymore doesn't mean I didn't work there. Then you should just ask for human resources. But again, in theory, you're supposed to keep up with that, but I didn't, because I didn't feel like anyone would, question me. A little bit of, my own mindset. If you're honest, you just assume everybody else is, and that they assume you are, so you don't think about people questioning, what you're up to. So, but, I learned that not everybody is the same. On the positive side, the stress of divorce may lead to personal growth. And it did in mine. I did a lot of, soul searching, mind searching, dove down deep to, decisions I might have made in my life and why. And, worked with a therapist on, some of the stuff that happened when I was a kid and things that made me kind of the way I was. I got all that hashed out, so it was actually a good thing for me. And it was for him too, because later on he went to bipolar skills training, anger management, and later on we went to couples counseling and ended up back together, because we loved each other, we just didn't know how to love each other. And the sense of violated expectations may be diminishing as midlife divorce becomes more common, because now divorce is not the big scandalous drama it used to be in like my grandmother's day. This change appears to be due largely to women's growing economic independence. And like I said, I had a little bit, I took jobs where I could work like 4 to 6 hours because I had young children at home. And I wanted to be there. I got them off to school, then I went to work, and then the older ones, I left, to watch the younger one, but I wanted to be home within an hour of them getting home, so that they were only there, for an hour, so that put me between the 4 and 6 hour jobs instead of an 8 hour job, because I didn't want to leave my children home alone that long, especially the one babysitting has a mental disability. So, that's not an ideal thing. I had tried letting my parents babysit, but there were issues with that. There were a couple incidences, and I'm like, no, this is not happening to my children. So we're not doing that anymore. So, um, I was not as economically well off for sure as the ex-husband was. Long-standing marriages may be less likely to break up than more recent ones because as couples stay together, they build up marital capital, financial and emotional benefits of marriage that become difficult to give up. And that's because you plan a future together, and me and my husband, we have a future planned, and most everyone I know has a future planned, and that is not something you want to just give up on as easy. Whereas if you're just living together, you have nothing else going on, you don't know it's easier to dissolve that union than someone you've invested your time and money and effort and emotions into. It's harder to just throw that away. College education decreases the risk of separation of divorce after the first decade of marriage. Perhaps because college educated women and their husbands tend to have accumulated more marital assets and may have more to lose financially from divorced and less educated couples. Like the old joke, it's cheaper to keep her. The effects of the empty nest, the transition that occurs when the younger child leaves home, depends on the quality and length of the marriage. And again, some people stay together for the kids. I knew a couple who was doing that, lived down the street from me. And when the kids was grown, they split ways, and she went over here and lived, he went over there and lived. But while they were raising the kids, they lived in the same house. He had his own room, she had her room, and each to their own. But in a good marriage, the departure of grown children may usher in a second honeymoon. Like I said, for me and my husband now, it's better because we want to go for a weekend getaway, we're gone. We want to go on a little vacation, we're gone. We want to go out for a day, and we don't have to worry about nobody. Everybody's grown and they got their own deal, and we can do what we want to do. In a shaky marriage, if a couple have stayed together for the sake of the children, they may now see no reason to prolong the bond, because if you're together just for the children, once children are out of the home, you don't have a reason to be together. So, divorce rates among aging baby boomers now in their 60s, many of whom married later and had fewer children than in previous generations, are projected to continue to rise. So that's bad news for the boomers. You guys are getting divorced at a record rate. Even in long marriages, the increasing number of years that people can expect to live in good health after child rearing ends may make the dissolution of a marginal marriage and the prospect of possible remarriage a more practical and attractive option. And that's why I got divorced, because in my first marriage, the person was being very controlling, trying to micromanage my life. And I mean, you know what? No, I don't have to deal with this. I don't need you. And if this is all you got for me, I'd rather have something else. And so that's what I did. I left him and went out there, found a few other relationships that did not work out, because sometimes after a certain age, there's not a lot going on out there. And then the second time, there was some abuse, and so I certainly was not going to stay in that, nor was I going to allow my children to stay in that. So that marriage ended as well, and the hope was I could find a better partner, but as it turned out, I couldn't. It's like I said to some folks who were like, why can't you find? And I'm like, because the good ones got married and stayed married because they were the good ones. And now all that's left is not so good. But anyway, me and the ex, we did some growing and learning and got some therapy, and we're able to put things back together and be in a good place. Furthermore, divorce today may be a less of a threat to well-being in middle age than in young adulthood, because usually by middle age you kind of know who you are and what you want, whereas in younger days you might be just clinging to that person because you love them so much. So that conclusion comes from a 5-year longitudinal study that compared the reactions of 6,948 young and middle-aged adults taken from a nationally representative sample. The researchers used Rift's 6-dimensional measure of psychological well-being, as well as other criteria. In almost all respects, middle-aged people showed more adaptability than younger people in the face of separation or divorce, despite their more limited prospects for remarriage. And that's because, like I said, you're more mature, you're more well-adjusted by the age in general. There are people who are not, but you're more able to handle things when you're middle-aged than you were when you were young. Their greater maturity and expertise in handling life's problems may have given them an advantage in coping with the loss of a spouse. Middle-aged women in their position reported better social relations and greater personal mastery than younger women, as well as less depression and hostility. And I went out in the community and started doing things and getting involved in things, and I had a really active social life, so I was happy with that. After remaining separated or divorced for 5 years, they also had a greater sense of autonomy. Middle-aged men facing termination of marriages were more self-accepting than younger men, again for the same reason, maturity and everything. Those who remained separated or divorced for 5 years reported less depression and hostility. So they were in a better place, but also less personal growth. So women tend to go out and do some personal growth, and men do not. Men just kind of chill. Gay and lesbian relationships. Gays and lesbians, now in middle age, grew up at a time when homosexuality was considered a mental illness. When I was talking with a psychologist I used to work with, and he said that, I forget what year, but until I think it was probably late 80s, it was considered, it was in the diagnosis book as a mental illness. So that's kind of sad. And homosexuals tended to be isolated not only from the larger community but from each other. Today, this pioneer generation is just beginning to explore the opportunities inherent in the growing acceptance of homosexuality. Since many homosexuals still do not come out until well late into adulthood, the timing of this crucial event can affect other aspects of development. Like my kids are amazed, like when they look at TV shows and things from like the 70s, and I said, we were all in the same boat. We didn't care, we told black jokes and white jokes about each other. Nobody cared. It was just there. There were openly gay people, in movies and things. Nobody cared. We knew, but nobody cared, and I don't know when, probably after the 90s, suddenly it became a big deal and everybody cared about everybody else's deal. And it's like, we need to go back to that point where it's none of our business. We need to keep our nose out of other people's business and mind our own, and the world would be a better place. Middle-aged gays and lesbians may be associating openly for the first time and establishing relationships. So if you did what you felt like you were supposed to do, and entered a heterosexual relationship and you raised your children, and then maybe in midlife you decide, this is not me, I'm not happy, I feel differently, and so they might decide that now's the time to go explore that. Many are still working out conflicts with parents and other family members because, our parents all want us to be this perfect cookie cutter person and do all the things they think we should be doing. So if they're not okay with their child being gay, that becomes a big issue. And there's always going to be some family members who are not accepting of people's choices. Sometimes including their spouses, because like I said, if they did what they thought they had to do, got married and had kids and everything, and then the kids are grown, and they might have to tell, the husband and wife, you know what, this just isn't me. I know we've been doing this for, 30 years or so, but it's just not me, and I want to live my life and be me. Or hiding their homosexuality from them. And that's what a lot of folks choose to do. They don't want to come out. They're afraid of the repercussions, and I think that's sad. You should be who you are, and it shouldn't matter what your family, friends, people you work with, people you know, neighbor, whoever thinks about it. It's none of their business. They shouldn't be thinking about it. It's your business, and you should live your life the way you want to. And that's where I'm going to leave you for today. I hope this helped you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. Please like and share this educational program so we can spread it around the world. If you want to help me out, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to help me out even more, go to my Patreon page and become a patron. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. Until next time.